Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben.
This is Diego Sanchez, Randy Couture,
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, UFC 239 preview show. Dennis Kuratov here with Kasper Rozdilowski ahead of a juicy, steamy, exciting UFC card this weekend. And Cas, I feel like it's a packed card, a packed UFC card, and this could possibly be one of my favorite preview shows that we've done in quite some time.
Oh my, you hit the nail on the head. Juicy, steamy, exciting. It's how I like my hamburgers, my women, and my Submission Radio preview shows. Hopefully you guys enjoy it and enjoy the sexy guests we have on this week. We got the very delicious and always lovely Brett Okamoto returning to the program. I've really been digging our chats with Brett lately. Had him on a while ago. Now he's become a regular fixture of Submission Radio programming. I feel like, you know, you get your feet wet the first time, then you come on again and again. More rapport, more chemistry. Before we know, we're having a good time, you know? So I've been digging it. And I'm curious, and I feel like the fans and listeners have been digging it as well lately. People saying, damn, that Brett, he gives some good insight. So I'm curious what he has in store for us this week. We want to quiz him about UFC 239, and I'm excited to hear what he says. Also, Luke Thomas coming onto the program. Of course, we wanted to give him a big hat tip. Last week, he concluded a successful run of the MMA Hour. I believe for an entire year, him and Danny Segura. That's finished now, and of course the MMA beat as well. So we're very lucky to have him on the program. A lot of respect for Luke, a lot of respect for Danny as well, and you know the new twist they brought to the show. So I want to talk to him about UFC 239, but also get his thoughts on the MMA Hour and how he sort of reflects on that experience. And of course, he had a fun little saga with Chael Sonnen, so I want to sort of touch on that. Did they speak afterwards? What happened? How did that all end? So a lot of fun stuff to talk to Luke about, get his excellent analysis and previews and predictions. And that's not it, is it, Dennis? We've got another sexy guest as well, don't we?
That's right. OG Tommy Toehold returns to Submission Radio with the UFC 239 preview. Man, I cannot wait for you guys to listen to Tommy's preview this week. The guy is just absolutely hilarious. People forget this guy. Our relationship with Tommy Toehold started a long, long time ago, and we're still best friends to this day. So honored to have him on the program.
It's like a good marriage. There's still
sex
in the marriage.
I know. We know what makes it work. We won't discuss it right now. But if you need marriage advice, we know what makes it work. And Tommy Toehold definitely is a big part of that. We're honored to have him on another program. Of course, jump on YouTube, subscribe to his channel. If you still haven't, why aren't you following him on social media? The guy does great commentary when the events are on, always with hilarious gifts. And just the guy he's a national treasure. I mean, Nicolas Cage would steal him if he could. If this was a movie, Nicolas Cage would be stealing the declaration of Tommy Toehold. So make sure to check out his preview, UFC 239. That is later on in the episode. And Cass, you touched on Luke Thomas. I cannot wait to speak to him. I mean, you mentioned it before. We wanted to touch on the fact that he did such a remarkable job at the MMA Hour. We visited the set in November. I don't know if people saw that. We actually visited the set, spent some time with him and Danny. But the thing about him is he did a great job on that program. We know the stresses of putting these programs out. I can't wait to share the behind-the-scenes goss that me and Cass have about getting these guests together. It's absolutely brutal some weeks. I mean, even this week, we had a little bit of extra juice for this episode that didn't quite work out. But I can't wait to hear from Luke's perspective. Also, just a couple of quick things before we get started. First of all, happy birthday to John Anik. He's an old friend of the show. He's been on the program many times. Happy birthday, old friend John Anik. We hope you have a fantastic day. He's got a big assignment at UFC 239 coming up at the end of the week. Always gracious to us, always fantastic to us, always willing to come on the program and have a conversation with us whenever we're over there. Another thing I wanted to mention, Cass, is these Mark Hughes Foundation beanies. Check them out. You can buy one at $25. There's a great variation for your girlfriend. You know, you might be having an affair, but you want whoever you're having an affair with to look good in winter. Buy them this beanie. Okay, so you're having an affair. You're effectively ruining your relationship and betraying the person that you love. But if you donate $25 towards helping brain cancer, are you sort of evening out the karma? Think about that. The Mark Hughes Foundation website, jump on that. Grab yourself a beanie now. And then also, Cass, a big happy 4th of July to all of our listeners at home. I know it's a massive celebration over there that we're missing out on. I know we're not UFC 239. I know that we're not covering the card like we would usually, but I promise you there is a big announcement coming out soon. Let's just say maybe there's some more Submission Radio coverage around the corner. We don't want to say anything just yet, but just know We've had a meeting at the secret headquarters with our super friends, and it looks like things are coming together. So look out for that announcement soon, Cass.
Yeah, that's right. I can't wait to get on the Submission Radio jet, which may just be a regular Qantas jet, and we sit in economy. We have to beg for them to put us up in economy plus, which usually doesn't work out. But yeah, hopefully we'll be traveling to the States soon enough. Without further ado, just quickly want to thank you guys for all your lovely comments each and every week. It is a personal highlight of mine to go in there, read all your comments, and click the like button, click the love heart button, and respond. Everybody's hilarious in there. We have it's like regular friends. You know, you see the regular people in the comment section. You know the name, you know the avatar. I can almost predict who's going to comment now and who I'll be responding to momentarily, just hours after the episode drops. But you guys put a lot of effort into that, and so we always notice it, and we want to acknowledge it. I know some people, they'll listen on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify or wherever we are, and then they'll still go on YouTube, and then they'll comment and like the video just to show some support. So we really, really appreciate it. Anyway, without further ado, there's a lot of people to speak to. There's a lot of things to speak about. Our first sexy and delicious guest is on the line, and Dennis, I believe you're about to juice him.
All right, guys. Our next guest is known for some of the best coverage in MMA. Take the mystery of a 007, the coolness of a Denzel Washington, the tenacity of the Terminator, and you might get close to finding that secret sauce that makes him one of the great MMA media men in the game today. The cerebral assassin, the truth. Mama, there goes that man, Brett Okamoto. Welcome back to Submission Radio. It's great to have you on the program.
So nice to be back, guys. Thank you. Is this all off the cuff, or is this
Off
was
the cuff,
planned?
cool.
You had some material written out?
Hey, listen. This is all off the cuff. This is improv. Submission Rex is all improv, and our writers are not to be. All right, so my mum wrote the intro.
Our writers
yesterday.
are not to be credited.
They don't get paid. Does that still mean it's off the cuff? But no, it's great to have you on the program, Brett.
No, man. Thanks for having me, guys. Pleasure.
All right, so fantastic intros aside, let's get to business, man. It's a big week in MMA with UFC 239 around the corner. But before we get into that, just quickly, Brett, wanted to get your reaction of this huge Francis Ngannou win this past weekend, obviously beating JDS, a former title challenger, and really just adding some scalps to his list. Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, you know, the man is back on track, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, we wrote a piece on ESPN. It was like a panel between me and some of the other guys, and one of the questions was, have we learned anything about Francis Ngannou? And you know, I think you could really make a case for both sides of that. You know, you could make a case of, you know, we haven't really learned anything. I mean, the guy is just basically back to doing what he did prior to Stipe, but you know, we know that the guy has power. We know that he can knock out guys in the first round. Can he beat a guy like Stipe? Can he beat a guy like DC to take that next step and be a champion in the sport? You know, the jury is definitely still out on that. But to say that we haven't been able to learn anything over the last, you know, 3 fights, his win streak, I think we can take away a few things, you know, and as I wrote in that piece, one of them is that he's coming in a lot leaner. I mean, you can see it in his frame, and then you can also just see it on the scale. He immediately after that fight with Stipe, he started coming in about 10 pounds lighter, which I think is going to be a good thing for him. We've already seen it's a good thing for him. And you know, the other one is, you got to kind of take his word for this. And this is kind of a cliche thing, but I can kind of appreciate it with Francis. And that is that he's really just kind of found his love for it again, you know, and I can understand that the guy was on such a tear, and then he went into that Stipe Miocic fight, and they're you know, taking footage of him out in the desert, dropping sand from his hands, and he's supposed to be the next coming. And he put a lot of pressure on himself, you know, and that having that experience of losing that fight and then the Derek Lewis fight, that now he's back in a good place mentally. And it does appear so to me. I mean, the guy looks just so calm, so relaxed during fight week. I wasn't at this last one in Minneapolis, but when he fought Cain Velasquez in Phoenix at the beginning of the year, I picked up on that, you know, that the guy is just so loose and ready to do what he's so good at doing, and that is knock out guys in the first round. So I think that, yeah, it's a newer, improved version of Francis. That's what I believe.
And that was a great piece, by the way, Brett. Okay, so here's the thing. Before the Stipe loss, Francis, like you mentioned, was like the second coming. People couldn't wait to see what was going to happen. Everybody was super excited about him. But then after his loss to Stipe, everybody really cooled off on him. And I mean, even though he kept winning and kept doing things, it kind of wasn't the same excitement level that it was before the Stipe win. I'm feeling after this JDS win, though, people are starting to get back to that sort of level of excitement about Francis. Do you think he could get back to that point where he was before the Stipe loss, where people just see him as an absolute destroyer, and that loss is just completely in the rearview mirror? Do you think that's what's happening now?
Yeah, I do. I think he's back there. I do. I mean, they put him in another high-profile spot right after the Stipe loss. I believe it was International Fight Week. And it was the same night, right? The DC fought Stipe, so they were on the same card. It was set up that if Francis had gone out and knocked out Derek Lewis, he was going to be right back in it. And it just turned out he wasn't ready, And then if you think about it, he, they put him on that China card with Curtis Blades. But then after that, it has been high-profile spots. I mean, he's been on the ESPN here in the domestic, here in the States. Both of his last fights have been on ESPN. You get the feeling that the UFC would like to have a lot of eyeballs on him. I know that this last one he was actually supposed to fight at UFC 239, but still a similar deal. I mean, they're putting him back in those high-profile spots, and just like because of the way in which he's knocking these guys out. Yeah, I think he's back there. I think the level of hype is almost exactly where it was going into that Stipe fight.
So I guess the other question is, what exactly is next for him? Because Dana White seems pretty reserved as far as confirming that he is next in line. I guess when you have that kind of impressive resume and those last few wins, it is something that should earn you a title shot, especially in the heavyweight division. If Stipe wins, you got to think maybe it's a slightly tougher sell than DC. But even if DC wins, it seems like maybe Lesnar or Jones are sort of somewhat hopes for the UFC. Do you think Ngannou sort of gets that next title shot, and what do you think is likely to be next?
I think the UFC is in a spot, and look, you've noticed that Dana White has been doing this a lot, really over the last, I want to say 2 years, is that he doesn't commit to anything because he knows that he doesn't have to. And for media people, that can be a little frustrating, when we feel like there's an obvious answer to this, why can't you just say it? But at the same time, I can understand why Dana White doesn't say it, because he doesn't want to back himself into a corner. He wants to leave the door open for a situation like you mentioned of a Brock Lesnar coming back, or Jon Jones looking great, and then all of a sudden Jon Jones is calling out a heavyweight. I mean, you just don't know. If you commit to Francis Ngannou getting a title shot, and then this very next week, Jon Jones does something incredible, or Brock Lesnar says he wants to show up in Las Vegas, then it's unnecessary, I guess, if you're Dana White to commit to that early. I think that, there's nothing else for Francis Ngannou to do. I mean, he knocked out Cain Velasquez in the opening minute of that fight, right? I mean, he just knocked out another former champion, Junior Dos Santos, who is not what he once was, but he was on a 3-fight win streak. I mean, there's no one really else for him to fight in the meantime as he waits to get a title shot. Whether it's DC, whether it's Stipe, I mean, if DC, even if he were to retire and Francis would get a shot at a vacant belt, like maybe, who knows, against someone like Jon Jones. I mean, how incredible would that be if DC beats Stipe, retires, leaves the belt, and then Jones were to come up against Francis? There's just, this is one where I can understand why Dana is saying, hey, there's a lot of dust that needs to be settled. Let's find out what happens in these fights. I guess I don't blame him even for that one, but I will say that Francis Ngannou, whatever his next fight is, it has to be against someone for a title, just because it doesn't make sense to put him in a non-title fight at this point.
So I guess the big question is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Brett. Do you think Jon Jones calls out DC after his win this weekend if everything goes down smoothly? Do you think he's sort of saving this call out? Because I know during fight week and leading into this fight, you guys had a great sit-down interview as well. He's happy to defend the belt and he's happy to stay in the division. And there's some great contenders coming in like Chris Weidman, Luke Rockhold's on the same card. But do you think he's saving that call out for after his fight, especially if it's a devastating finish over Santos?
I mean, it would be a great play for him. I mean, if especially like you just mentioned, if it's a devastating finish and he gets on the mic and says, I want the winner of that, I'm coming for the heavyweight title. I mean, that just gives the sport a huge story to follow going into August, whether or not he'll do it, I'm not sure. I mean, Jon has kind of been he's kind of been cryptic about this, but he's also pretty much laid it out on the table. He strongly hinted at it that, hey, if I go up to heavyweight, I want it to be worth my while. I mean, if not, I got no problem staying in here light heavyweight. It's almost, a similar storyline to what we saw play out for a long time with Demetrius Johnson, where he's like, yeah, I'll move up, but there are certain risks that come with moving up, and I don't need to move up. So if you want me to move up, then you're going to have to pay me a lot. Well, the UFC was never willing to pay Demetrius Johnson what he wanted to move up because they didn't think the fight would sell. Jon moving up to heavyweight, that fight can sell. So you know, I could see Jon calling out, you know, I want the winner of the heavyweight, because it would create the situation in which, I mean, he's just putting money in his pocket at that point, because if he creates that storyline right then and there, then that's what the sport wants, and it puts the UFC on the hook to pay him what he wants to go up there. But, you know, Jon has surprised me a little bit in that he has stuck pretty clear to this. I'm staying at light heavyweight. There's plenty of guys here to fight. You know, Luke Rockhold fights earlier that night. We'll see what happens in that fight. If I had to put money on it, I would say he does not call out the heavyweight champion, but there's certainly reasons for him to do so.
Just on UFC 239, Brett, obviously we're all looking forward to it, and this is the preview show. I do feel like, compared to some of the other past international fight weeks, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of depth on this card, a lot of great fights, but maybe it just doesn't have that huge buzz about it. And do you feel like part of it is just because in the main event, yes, even though we have Jon Jones, who is a big draw in the sport, it is against Thiago Santos, a fight that a lot of people are already expecting to be incredibly one-sided?
Yeah, I think that's it. Because if you look at the card up and down, like you said, it's a deep card. There's a lot of young talent on this card. I think the UFC was smart in doing that. I mean, they've identified a lot of you know, athletes who are in their young 20s, like under 25, that they want to showcase here. I mean, Sean O'Malley was one of them, but there's a few others on this card. And then, you know, the co-main event, you can't really complain about that, right? Amanda Nunes, Holly Holm, that's a great co-main event. Ben Askren, Jorge Masvidal is a great fight. But you're right. I mean, it doesn't have that huge blockbuster feel, just because it's Jon Jones against, you know, and it sucks to say it this way, because Thiago Santos has earned the right to be here. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him, of course, but the way it feels like, it just feels like Jon Jones fighting the next guy, you know, and so that's why it doesn't feel like an international fight week. I can say that I'm so excited for this card, just on a sense of, like I said, top to bottom. It's going to keep my interest throughout. You know, I mean, there's those other cards. I think we all know what those cards are. When you're like, there's not much on the prelims. I don't know. 239 is not that at all. But you're right. As far as, you know, that one fight to hang your hat on, Jon Jones and Thiago Santos, it just is not it.
I love how you're human like us, Brett, and you have the same feelings like us about some of these prelim cards that we cover. And I'll tell you what, I mean, there was the LA Media Day, and I think one of the big storylines is going to be, you know, Masvidal actually rocking up to fight week. What's that going to be like? And also Luke Rockhold being at fight week, because he wasn't at fight week as well. He wasn't in LA. And speaking of Rockhold, in a lot of ways, how important do you believe is it for the UFC to have Luke Rockhold have an impressive 205 debut? So they could possibly build this Rockhold Jones fight, because it seems like this could be the next big sort of pay-per-view fight and a big title defense with Jon Jones, all the history that's been going on. And with it being a fascinating fight, if Luke Rockhold can get past Jan, who's a very, very difficult debut fight for light heavyweight.
Well, you asked how big is it for the UFC. I mean, I think it could be big. I think it's bigger for Luke Rockhold, though. You know, I mean, that's who I'm kind of thinking of more so than, you know, the UFC really needs a challenger for Jon Jones, which they do, you know, but light heavyweight is all of a sudden looking better than it has in the past. And some of these guys don't have names yet, but they're making their way up the ranks, and you know, the Dominic Reyes and the Johnny Walker and those type of guys. I mean, they're coming, and I'm not saying they're ready or that they will ever beat Jon Jones, but they are coming up, you know, and of course, the UFC would like a storyline there with Jon Jones and Luke Rockhold, but you know, they're going to be fine one way or another without it. I mean, they're going to find fights for Jon, and Jon is the greatest of all time, and they're going to make that appealing to people. You know, when I think about Luke's debut, I'm thinking more about him, man, because, you know, he's only fought once per year for the last 3 years. I mean, you go back to 2016, he only fought once. 17, same thing. 18, same thing. And now, you know, he had trouble making weight at 185, and then he had some bad luck and some injuries. You know, the injuries are easy for us to kind of set aside and blow over, but they're not easy for him. You know, I mean, he's now at a point in his career where Luke Rockhold, as beautiful of a man as he is, and we think of him as ageless,
almost as beautiful as you, Brett.
Been fighting for 12 years, guys. The guy's been fighting for 12 years, so he doesn't have a whole lot of time to play around here. I mean, I think he's got to look good in this fight, and he's got to make the right call outs, and yeah, he'll get opportunities because of who he is, but I think that this fight is really important for Luke, you know, more so than it is for the UFC.
How different do you think he can look, you know, without depleting himself and going down all the way to 185? What do you expect? You're absolutely right about the long list of injuries and the bad luck that Luke Rockhold has, you know, I almost feel like there's similarities between the way people look at Cain Velasquez and how, oh man, his career's been so railroaded by injuries. I feel like Rockhold's career is very, very similar in that sense. But without boiling himself down to 185, do you feel like we're going to see a better version of him this coming weekend?
Yeah, I think he's got a lot of opportunities to succeed in this division. I mean, taking everything still into account of what I said about light heavyweight, and then it's in a better place than it's been for years, I still think it's pretty wide open, especially for a guy like Luke, who is a former champion. I mean, he doesn't have to win too many fights to get what he wants, right? So there's that. He has that going for him. I think everything that he says, and it's what you would expect him to say. But when he's talking about things like, I have more technique than these guys at light heavyweight, they can get away with being a little sloppy and relying on their power and everything, but I have a lot more technique than some of these guys in the top 10. I tend to agree a little bit with what he's saying there. I think some of his tougher matchup, like Gustafsson would have been a real tough matchup for him.
Yeah.
I don't think Jan is, not to say that Jan is a walkover fight by any stretch of imagination. This is a very close fight, competitive fight to me. But, I think he's got a good draw here in Jan. He's got an opportunity to make some noise. So, yeah, I mean, one thing that'll be interesting to me too is how his chin looks as well, how his durability looks in terms of his ability to take a punch. I mean, he's going to be fighting bigger guys, but I do tend to think that you put your body through that devastating of a weight cut, that your ability to take a punch is somewhat compromised, and we've kind of seen that in Luke's career. When he gets clipped, he gets shook by it. So without the weight cut, will his ability to take a punch be better? That's something that I'd be interested in. So. He's in a good spot immediately coming in because he's a big name in a wide open division. But yeah, there's a lot riding on this particular fight. He's got to get off to a good start.
And also the legs. Can't forget those gorgeous legs of his. The issues with the shins, and obviously the multiple issues that he's had with his knees. Does he finish this fight with another injury that's going to sideline him for the rest of 2019? Brett, who knows? It's going to be fascinating to see. And speaking of fascinating matchups, we got Masvidal versus Askren. You brought that up before, but I just want to get your perspective. Why do you think, because we had Colby on the show last week, why do you think the UFC decided to take away that title shot away from him and possibly set up this Askren or Masvidal title shot instead? Do you believe it's because they see a possible big draw in Askren and want to sort of capitalize on him while he's still around? Why do you think they decided to sort of switch things up and give Colby Robbie Lowe, which is a fantastic fight? Makes everybody excited, but it's gone from sort of a co-main or a main on a pay-per-view to a main fight sort of on a free card. So it's a bit of a different story now.
Well, I think the UFC, they're making business decisions, right? And there are times when we would really like them to make a sport decision of, this guy is the most deserving, and to give them credit, they do stick to that quite a bit. They get a lot of flack for it, but I think if you really look at the ranking, they follow their rankings most of the time, right? But at the end of the day, they're still business, and when they make business decisions, it's obvious, and we can complain about it sometimes, and there's a debate to be had there. That debate will always exist. Of how are you making your choices? Why hasn't Tony Ferguson ever gotten a damn title shot? Those cases. We're always going to be talking about them. In this particular case, I think they're looking at it as, okay, so we have a business decision to make. Kamaru Usman, who's he going to fight, right? If they make a title fight between Usman and Covington right now, is it a big fight? It's not a small fight, but I don't think it's a big time fight, But they're thinking, but then if you compare it to this situation of, you've got Ben Askren fighting Jorge Masvidal in July. And now in August, you have Colby Covington facing Robbie Lawler. And again, to circle back to my point about them keeping their options open, why can't they keep their options open on this one? Usman has said that he's still recovering from injury. I think what they've created here is a sense of whatever happens now, they're going to get a big welterweight title fight. Either Ben Askren's going to go out and look great, and he's going to call out, Usman. He's going to be calling him Marty, and that's going to take off, right? Or Colby Covington is going to be fighting on free television, on cable television, ESPN here in the States. He's going to be fighting a former champion in Robbie Lawler. He's going to get that platform and that spotlight, and that's going to raise his selling power, when it comes to a welterweight fight. So I don't think it was necessarily about we're the UFC trying to, rob Covington of something that he'd earned. Even if in essence that's kind of what they're doing here, I think that the motivation was, let's build a bigger welterweight title fight. Whether it's Askren or whether it's Covington at the end of it, we'll take either one. But let's create a situation and let's put Covington in a fight with Robbie Lawler because Usman can't fight him right now, so that at the end of the day we will have a bigger welterweight title fight than we have right now.
I think those are some really good points that you laid out there, Brett, especially Colby Covington fighting on ESPN is sort of raising his stock and the awareness of the casual viewer. You did a great sit-down interview with Ben Askren this past week. I definitely urge people to check it out. Fight-wise, how do you think he does against Jorge Masvidal, who it wasn't that long ago that he was getting out-grappled by Damian Maia, but he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, Masvidal does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a really compelling, interesting style matchup, right? Which is funny because we all know what both of them are trying to do.
Yeah.
Like we all know exactly what it's going to kind of look like in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. We just don't know which one is going to prevail. I obviously live in Vegas. I pay attention to the betting line. Ben Askren is a -250 favorite as of right now, as of this morning when I looked at it. Wow. So, Vegas has made it clear who they believe in on this one. And I can understand why. I think Ben, one thing that I'm not sure if he said it in this last interview that we talked about or another time, but he said, one thing that should scare everybody is that I showed that I have a chin. That's one thing that a lot of people didn't know is how well he could take a punch, and Robbie Lawler clocked him and he was able to somehow still survive in that fight. We all know how hard Robbie Lawler hits. So, does George Masvidal have the ability to hit him harder and put him out than Robbie Lawler did in that instance without being taken down in the meantime? I do tend to favor the stylistic matchup for Ben, but George has been fighting for so long. He's got so much experience that if he figures out a way to keep Ben off of him, and then, pretty soon you see that wrestler thing where it's all of a sudden Ben doesn't have the same athleticism, the same explosiveness into his shot, then it could turn into George's night.
I just feel like this is the X factor fight of the card that kind of makes it special this week. I just feel like the UFC, they really got something right. Even though Demetrius Johnson, unbelievable fighter, I'm happy to see Askren have some kind of run in the UFC before it's all said and done, right? Because it's just an unbelievable experience for all of us, including the media. Let's talk about Amanda Nunes. She's really building a legacy for herself here. Brett, she fights Holm. She's kind of had a few issues building a fan base initially because she had that English barrier and people didn't sort of catch on to her straight away. But do you feel like she's getting to a point now where she's becoming quite a big draw and people are sort of starting to really like her and support her and embrace her after what she's been able to accomplish in the sport?
Yeah, it's unfortunate to say, but it's the truth. She's still not as big of a draw even as the woman she's fighting this weekend. If you were to unbiasedly say, well, who's a bigger draw, Holly Holm or Amanda Nunes? It's still Holly Holm, in my opinion. But I think what's happened is Amanda's not necessarily a pay-per-view draw, but she has everybody's respect in terms of who is the best female fighter on the planet. The run that she's had now at bantamweight, and then especially knocking out Chris Cyborg in the way that she did. Everyone universally is calling her the number one female fighter in the world. So she has what she wants in that regard, and she's going to be on these big cards, and she's going to have the UFC is obviously invested in her quite a bit. If you go to the UFC's new facility here in Vegas, in Dana White's office, he has 2 photos hanging up in it. One of them is Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather, and the other one's Amanda Nunes. That does say something to me. I think the UFC is obviously fans of what Amanda Nunes does. She's incredibly entertaining to watch. I think she's in a great place. But if the question is, she's earned her respect, but she has not turned into a pay-per-view draw, if I'm being honest.
It's like the Submission Radio offers, Brett. One photo is, of course, Luke Rockhold, and the second one is yourself from the Fight Week here in Melbourne when you were sitting on that stage. Just quickly, while we're talking about this fight, what's your prediction here? Holly Holm, super tough, able to win it. She had a up and down career in the sport. Do you think she can get it done? Do you think she can beat Amanda Nunes this weekend?
I think she can. I'm not predicting her to do it. Amanda said something to me that I thought was pretty. I agreed with. And that's not. Is that Holly doesn't change a whole lot from fight to fight. She's very, very good at what she does, and she will capitalize on mistakes that you make. But I think you have to bring something different to the table. You have to surprise Amanda Nunes in some way. or you have to maybe wear her out through 5 rounds. I don't think Holly she sets a high pace, but I think just matchup wise, from a style standpoint, Amanda has a lot of advantages here.
Great points all around, Brad. Just quickly before we let you go and get out of your hair, we already spoke a little bit about Jones Santos, but any predictions or any particular performances that stand out in mind? I mean, against Anthony Smith, a lot of people felt like Jones was trying to sort of get the rounds in. Do you think maybe he goes out here and tries to put Santos away a little bit quicker?
I don't think Jon cares. I think Jon, part of what makes him so great, and maybe this is fresh in my mind because I've talked to some people about this over the last week, and that is that he just doesn't get emotional. He doesn't think about things like, oh, I have to get a finish here, or oh, I need to do this, or I need to do that. I mean, he's calculated. You know, he's someone compared him to George St. Pierre in that way. You know, that you're not going to make this guy get off of his game for any way, and so he's not going to go out there and say, I need to make a statement on International Fight Week and finish Thiago Santos. He will do so if the opportunity presents itself, and he'll be very ruthless in that. But he's not going to force anything, I guess is what I'm saying. So I am predicting that he finishes Santos. I just think he's that much better. He's you know, I just think he will finish Santos, but I don't think he's putting any extra pressure on himself to do it.
It's going to be fascinating. I know the UFC released the free fight between him and Vitor Belfort back when Vitor Belfort was the size of a small train, and it just reminds you of, like, even though the guys had PED controversies and we all know all the personal stuff, he's been in the game for so long and beating so many of the guys at their best. It just reminds you of the incredible legacy he's going to have when it's all said and done. He still feels like he's new to the sport for some reason. He still feels like a young guy. He's been through the best of the best in their prime. Unbelievable. Anyway, guys, speaking of guys in their prime, Brett Okamoto is one of them. Follow him on Twitter at @BOkamoto, ESPN. Mama, there goes that man. Brett, it's great to have you on the program. Of course, check out his UFC 239 coverage, sit-down interviews with everybody, and, of course, a lot more stuff coming up. One of the best in the game. Blessed to have him on the wall of our office and also on this episode of Submission. Thank you so much for being on the program.
I appreciate it, man. I miss you guys. I hope I get out to Australia sometime before the end of the year.
We might surprise you with a trip to the States sooner than you expect, Brett. But
is that room still available, Brett, or what's going on?
We'll see you over here then. I love it. Yeah.
Get the sofa bed ready, Brett. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Brett. Bye.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
What's up, fight fans? I'm the Burn Pizza of Mixed Martial Arts, Tommy Toehold, and it's International Fight Week. It's the biggest week in all of MMA. There's the Hall of Fame. There's the Fan Expo. That's still a thing, right? Is there a tough finale this week? Hopefully not. But who cares about all that shit? There's a huge card that culminates the week on Saturday, and here is why you need to be watching. I can't even believe I'm trying to sell you this card because it sells itself, but I'm gonna do it anyway. 2 title fights. The main event, the greatest fighter in the history of ever, Jon Jones. He's taking on Thiago Santos. Santos has Thor's hammer tattooed on his chest. Thor's, of course, Australian. We already have a tie to Submission Radio right there. Seriously, though, Santos is powerful as fuck, and he looks like he could be in a Marvel movie. Is he gonna beat the best fighter to ever step in the cage? Probably not. But it only takes one punch with a monster like that, and Jones will have to avoid him for 5 rounds. And by avoid him, I mean kick his knee until he tears an ACL and is crippled for life, and poke his eyes until he's blind. But it's gonna be fun to watch either way, and that is just the main event. This card is so stacked up. In the co-main event, we have the greatest female fighter in history of fighting. She has to be because she beat the previous best. That's how math works. Amanda Nunes is taking on, I believe, the only person in the entire sport she hasn't yet beaten, Holm. Holly Preacher's daughter Holm, the one that dethroned Ronda Rousey. She's got the kicks, she's got the power, she's got the knowledge, but can she get it done? It might be the last great challenge for Nunes. It's about as compelling a fight as you can make in the UFC right now. I think it's gonna end up being an all-time classic. Holy shit. How hyped are you for UFC 239? But wait, it's International Fight Week. That means the entire card is stacked up, not just the main and co-main. In our feature bout, we have a fight everyone is dying to see. Jorge Masvidal, coming off his invasion of England, he was dropping off 3 pieces with the soda left and right. It didn't even matter if they were his opponent on the card. And now he's back in the US to fight the mouth from Milwaukee, Funky Ben Askren. I love this fight so much. I love how different they are. Ben is this jolly, silly guy with goofy hair who's always trying to irritate people. Masvidal, and Masvidal is this calm, stoic, badass motherfucker who's always saying cool shit even when he's not trying to. But it's not just their personalities, I love the style matchup. We know Masvidal is a killer on the feet. I think Darren Till is still unconscious, and obviously Ben Askren is an all-time great wrestler in MMA. Who is going to implement their style? Will it be 3 rounds of Askren grinding Jorge into dust, or will the funky one get hit with an extra crispy left that puts his funky lights out? It's one of the biggest and best fights of the year between 2 of the most interesting fighters, and there are title implications. Holy shit, what a feature bout. As for the rest of the card, Luke Rockhold is making his light heavyweight debut. Diego Sanchez is fighting Mike Chiesa. Giblert himself, Gil Melendez, is returning to take on Arnold Allen. The Scrap Pack is fucking back. War Caesar Gracie. This is without a doubt guaranteed to be one of the best shows of the year, and I can't wait. It can't fail. There's no way in hell this card isn't awesome. I know you're gonna watch it because it's International Fight Week, and what are you, an asshole? No, you're the best. That's my pitch. That's all I got. I think we sold at least 3 more pay-per-views here. Submission Radio, you guys are seriously the best. Thank you for asking me to do these. I enjoy the hell out of it. I enjoy the hell out of your show. Back to you.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest needs very little introduction. If there was a Mount Rushmore of MMA media, he would most certainly be on it. Known for his excellent analysis and discussion on the Luke Thomas Show on Sirius XM Mondays through to Fridays, as well as MMA Fighter, the MMA Beat, and of course recently the MMA Hour. He's very kind to join us here in between his busy schedule. Luke Thomas, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you, man?
It is an honor to be here, boys. Thank you for having me.
The honor is ours. And we were kind of playing around, Luke, last week. We wanted to sort of mention the great job that you and Danny did on the MMA Hour on last week's episode. But we kind of wanted to have you on the show to say this, because we say this behind the scenes to you all the time, but I don't think our listeners get to hear it on the show enough, and that is the fact that you did an excellent job on the MMA Hour with Danny. You really brought some new aspects to the program. And I mean, it's just been over a week now since the show's last episode. So I just want to know, how do you look back on it now? As it's kind of sunk in that the MMA Hour is done, I imagine Mondays would be different for you now without all the travel and just doing your normal show.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate you guys saying the nice things. Mondays will be a little bit different, certainly. But I'm up for the challenge. And once my other projects get going, it will be, people are like, oh, you taking a hiatus? I'm not taking a hiatus. I have dialed back what kind of work I was doing, but I've not eliminated it. So you'll see, I have an announcement about my next step. I think it'll be out on Monday. And you'll see after that, that, you know, there's still a lot of work that will go into it, but not nearly as much as before. To be honest, man, I'm like relieved it's over. If I could just be completely candid, it's not that I'm not in any way grateful. Like, as I said on the show itself, anybody who gets an opportunity to do something like that has to be incredibly grateful, and I was. But I needed to do something that was of my own imagination, and you know, I was taking over someone else's show, which I had done previously when I was on Spike TV, and that can be okay to an extent, but really I have found that the best things that you can do creatively are the things that come from your own imagination, and I needed to do that. I needed to depart from all that stuff. I needed a clean break and a fresh start, and I wanted to do something of my own interest. And also, like, honestly, man, I feel like we're living, I don't know how you guys feel, but I kind of feel like we're living in a really weird era of MMA where nobody's like talking about, like, there's this weird silence about all these really important things. And it's just bizarre. And I kind of feel like I need to have the kind of program where I'm not encumbered. And I don't know how you do that if you're doing a studio show like that, where you're trying to like make sure you have like all the most relevant guests, stuff like that. To do that, you know, puts you, I think personally, this is my opinion, people may disagree who have done something like that, but like, I just feel like it puts you, I don't know, because I do a radio show where I have guests. It's not about having guests, but there was something about like on that day and that time, I felt like, I don't know. I felt like, how do I say this exactly? I felt like it didn't enable me to really sink my teeth into the more important issues. And I need to do, and it can be fun too, but I needed an opportunity to do something like that. So I think that's what I'm going to do next.
Yeah, dude, that's actually excellent, because I always loved your stuff from Promotional Malpractice and, of course, Monday Morning Analyst. And in a lot of ways, some of that was still, part of the MMA Hour. But I think that's why it's great that you got the Luke Thomas show, and that's where you sort of discuss these kind of issues, and you sort of have a bit more free reign to just kind of be yourself and do exactly what it is that, you're excellent at. You mentioned sort of being relieved about it being over, and we can understand what that's like, because, there's always so many crazy things that happen behind the scenes. And you mentioned that there was a lot of crazy things that you and the crew were dealing with. It's funny because, we never talk about this kind of stuff as well. With your show, with our show, you just see the finished product. And sometimes people have no idea what it took to get that product out there, the things that fell apart. I'm just wondering, what were some of to sort of put it in perspective, what were some of the crazy things that you guys had to deal with on a weekly basis that maybe people didn't know or appreciate, to sort of be able to even see the show?
Oh God, it's hard to know even where to start. Say the biggest one that caused me the most heartache was we would book a bunch of guests, and then Sunday night into Monday morning, they would just start falling apart and then for like these reasons that you couldn't even understand. I have some theories about why that's the case, but I'll share those at a later date. But suffice to say, it'd be like Sunday night, I'd be like looking at the lineup, it'd be like, okay, like we have a great list for tomorrow. And then you just ask yourself, which one of these ones, like, it was like going to war. They're not all going to be here at the end. You know what I mean? It's like, which ones are going to die on the hill before we even get to the battle? I just, and you just could, and then you see the finished product, and you'd be like, that's it. And I'd be like, no, that's not. But what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to go out there and blast them? You can't do that. And it was just, there was a lot of things, and there's all smaller stuff, like you have a guest book and then their phone doesn't work, or it would die, or I honestly, though, for me, it was the guest booking side. I think more than anything was just caused me a lot of heartache, and that's why. And again, I do it on my radio show. It's not. You guys do one. You have guests. It's not about having guests per se. It was just something about that slot on Mondays that was it was a challenge, man. It was a real challenge.
Do you reckon if he could have gone back, you guys would have done it on a different day? Was that ever sort of discussed, or was it always supposed to be the Monday sort of?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to do a show like that, I think Monday is the right time. It's just there's never a perfect scenario. You know what I mean? Because like I had to get uptown. Like I would have liked to have done a longer show. But you got to get uptown. You got to go do my other one, and that's another benefit too. That's nothing to complain about. That's something you should be happy about. But it's going to restrict some of your options, and you talked about like making it mine. I think I did put some unique stamp on it. I think I tried to make it feel as different as I could. But in the end, man, I don't ever felt like it really was mine. I felt like parts of it were mine. And that's, again, I'm not, trust me when I tell you this, I am not blaming anybody for that. That is just, I think it's just the way it is, just the way it is. It's no one's fault. It's no one's blame. It's nothing. It's just, I felt like in order to do, again, right by the sport and right by myself, clean break, fresh, do something different. That's what I wanted to do.
Well, if it puts your mind at ease, our show's during the week and we still have all the guest problems that you mentioned on every single week. And for people that don't realize,
even this episode, absolutely, no one will ever find out.
Even this episode. Yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely brutal and stressful. So we totally understand. But we're disappointed because we didn't get a Submission Radio Vegemite on behind the desk at the MMA Hour. We were going to bring it on the next trip, but
hey, you know what though? Tell you what, save it. Let's see what you guys think of my coming announcement. There might actually, I don't know if this is true or not, but there might be an opportunity to work something in. I guess we'll see. But
wow,
dude, people don't understand this about the guest booking side. It doesn't matter if you've got like the tiniest pocket. Like I didn't have a small show. I had like one of the fairly more noteworthy programs. Yeah. And dude, it's like these fighters, I swear to God, even when they mean well, even when they mean absolutely well, like Kevin Lee was was supposed to be the second to last episode. He just got the time zone. And don't get me wrong, shouts to Kevin Lee because he profusely apologized. I love Kevin. It was just a mistake, it was just a mistake. But that kind of thing, I just sat there and I asked myself, it's like, how much bigger of a show do I have to do before this stops happening? And the answer is, I don't think I'm even anywhere close.
Yeah, I think it's funny because now, like, you've got shows on major networks like ESPN and TV, so they're like, well, we've got ESPN, we've got blah, blah, blah. So, like, who cares if I'm in the wrong time zone for some of these podcasts? So now we feel it, man. We're in Australia, Luke. So can you imagine, middle of the morning? Some people say we sound a little bit sleepy. It's because we are. Now, just one more thing before we talk about UFC 239. We saw your back and forth with Chael Sonnen after his retirement. You put out a video which absolutely broke apart any of the points he made. He then made a follow-up video where he basically denied saying a single bad thing about you and went on to say a bunch of nice things about your run on the MMA Hour and hey, he'll support you, whatever you do next. What do you think of that video, and do you think maybe the entire situation was sort of created as more of a work by him to get a few more clicks on his channel, possibly?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll say this. I'll tell you boys this. I've never told anyone this. We actually spoke, Chael and I, after all of that. And I cannot reveal the contents of the conversation. Suffice to say, though, that I think he and I see eye to eye. I did not actually see the second video. I don't like those kinds of beefs things. Like, I don't like getting sucked into it. The only thing that was different about, like, for example, like, why didn't I do the same thing with Jon? It's because, like, Jon Jones, when he was like, "Do you want to answer my question?" Well, partly he doesn't have to answer my question. And the other part was, to this day, I don't even know what he's mad about. I legitimately have no clue.
Yeah, that's what we were wondering. Like, we had no idea. No idea what it could be.
People used to accuse you of being a Jon Jones apologist. So I think, which I don't think you are, but when he said that at 214, it came as a big shock.
And I even asked his management, I was like, dude, what is he mad about? So, like, because, look, you're going to get your coverage wrong at times. So I could go back and check it. They didn't even, they still don't know. But, like, at least with Chael, he was like, okay, I don't like this. And so I felt like the need under that circumstance to defend myself. In the end, here's what I would say about it for folks who want to, like, know. Whether it was a work or not, that's up to Chael to, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I kind of have a hunch. Maybe it was a little bit too, but I don't know. What did it do for my channel? I got it was the second most popular video I did in the last 28 days. But my live show that I did, post-fight show for UFC 238, did way more subscribers and made more money. So it's like, did me some good, but not earth-shattering. You know, it was fine. It was cool. But most importantly, it's over. And that's what I care about.
So you guys, just to set the record straight, you guys are cool now. It's not a situation where there's any reason. I don't know how you did that, Luke, because you had, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had the last episode of the MMA Hour, right? Then you had your show. So that was brutal as it is. Then you go over to do your show. This is what I was talking to all the guys about. You went over to do your show, and then you had this huge video to respond to Chael Sonnen. This was all done in the same day. I have no idea how you did it. So are you guys all squared away now? And you must have needed a couple of days, because we wanted to get you on the show last week, and we totally understood when you said, guys.
I was fried last week.
I'm fried. Yeah. So you guys are all cool now.
I think Chael and I are just fine. And, you know, how did I do it? The same way I did every show this past year, by the skin of my fucking teeth. That's how I did every fucking show. So there you go.
Just quickly, I know you didn't see the second video from Chael. It was quite funny because he was very, very nice. He said a lot of nice things about you. He sort of congratulated you on the MMA Hour run, and he's like, oh, you know, Luke's finishing up. He had a great show. He had Sirius XM. It was a fantastic studio, and he was obviously very confused about which show was sort of finishing up. He made it sound like the Sirius show was ending, and then he's like, whatever Luke does in the future, I'll be there. I'll support him. And it just came off hilarious because kind of like the first video, zero fact checking there. So,
you know, although in fairness to him, I would have people on my SiriusXM show on Mondays, and this happened enough times where I was like, "Fuck, really?" Where like the interview would be over and they would be like, "All right, thanks for having me on the MMA Hour, Luke," and I'd be like. It's like, you know, that ended hours ago, right? But whatever. What are you gonna do, man? You just, hey, you know what? They came on the show.
Yeah,
that's really all I cared about. So it's fine. I don't care.
100%. Let's talk UFC 239. By the way, appreciate you telling us all those fun stories, man. It's sort of giving us insight into your life. Let's talk UFC 239, of course. In the main event, we've got Jon Jones defending his belt against Thiago Santos. And, you know, much like Anthony Smith, you know, not many people are giving Santos much of a chance. And, you know, in that Smith fight, we saw Jon Jones go the distance. We spoke to Brett Okamoto before, and he sort of gave a theory as to, we kind of asked him, you know, do you think it's going to be similar where he's going to sort of look to get rounds, or do you think he's going to try and set a statement? And Brett kind of said he doesn't think Jon Jones really cares, and that's kind of a skill of his, where he's like a GSP. He doesn't really get emotional. He just kind of does what's right. And it kind of made me think that's probably one of his, I don't want to say best attributes, but it's almost like a hidden talent of his, that he never lets anything get to him. The pressure, he doesn't feel like, hey, it's a pay-per-view, you have to, you know, make a statement or anything like that. Do you feel like that's one of his good attributes?
For sure. Did Brett do this last week, or was this on this episode?
This is about an hour ago, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously I've not heard what Brett had to say, but that sounds about right. I mean, for me, the way I look at it is, here is a guy who, you asked about like making a statement. I am sure that making a statement is something he would love to do, but what he really loves to do, and what, you know, they always say, oh, work hard and the money will come. Mm-hmm. Which is not necessarily true, but there is some kind of truth to it, which is if you're just chasing commercial opportunity, you may not be setting yourself up for either happiness or real long-term financial returns. Whereas if you really focus on a craft, get really good at it, and pursue that with all your might, there is a decent chance anyway, or at least some kind of a chance in theory, that as you really progress through the ranks of whatever that chosen field is, now that you've got expertise, you'll be higher in demand. The process of growth will just be more personally rewarding and then ultimately fulfilling in the end. I think it's something like that. I see Jon as a really keen, self-aware that he is a problem solver. I think he looks at situations and says, what is the problem and how do I solve it? And he has, I won't say a defense first kind of style. What I say is, he has really good defensive sensibilities to protect himself. And then once he puts up that shield, then he begins to assess what is happening in front of him and then pursues some kind of an action. And Thiago Santos, excuse me, what am I saying? He's going to give Jon a reason to be defensive early and then open up on him late. Thiago Santos, does anyone really see him going 5 rounds unless he completely abandons the way that he's been fighting? So like, this is not, I'd be very surprised if this goes the distance at all. Even you can say the same thing about Anthony Smith, but even that isn't necessarily true because that was a guy that at least made some kind of overture or nod towards thinking and not getting enough credit for how talented he is. Whereas Thiago is sort of a recognized, the guy's got a hammer tattooed on his chest, a sort of force of nature.
Yeah.
So I think Jon is going to treat this like, how do I solve this problem? He will make reads, he will adjust accordingly. And then because, again, maybe he loses, but my hunch is because he's so good, he will find huge openings that a very aggressive guy is going to leave as soon as that first wave offense begins to wane a little bit. But like making a statement, the statement will come by virtue of the skill and the problem-solving ability.
And I feel like there's this general consensus that Jon Jones might take Santos down early and sort of get rid of that threat, but he spoke about it in an interview about how, you know, guys have come at him really fast in the past, like DC in the second fight, and he's kind of still, even Glover Teixeira, who was known for his knockout power, and he's happy to stand there and trade. So I think he's going to do a lot of that in this fight. I'm wondering, everyone's kind of speculating on what's next for Jon Jones. People are already looking over Santos, and I feel like that's a really sort of tough question because there are so many possibilities. What do you think Jon Jones actually wants? Like in an ideal scenario, you know, because he sort of flirts with the idea of heavyweight, but of course he wants to be compensated for it. So it's not that he necessarily doesn't want to go there, but he wants to get paid properly. Ideal scenario, what do you think he wants? Because, you know, he seems like he's happy to do 205 if he's not getting that money, but I feel like he'd probably want, you know, the Lesnar fights, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe a shot at the heavyweight title, maybe even that heavyweight fight with DC if the money's right.
So Mike Bond put out a really good article on MMA Junkie listing in different detail the kinds of numbers that indicate what kind of a fighter Jon Jones has been, which is to say, you know, he has the record for most punches attempted, most punches landed, significant strikes.
That sounds like a Mike Bond article, by the way.
Yeah, real, like super dry and awful, yet somehow helpful. But anyway, the point being is there's like a lot of different numbers, not just about what happened in the cage, but then like what do the numbers say about how many champions he's beaten and where he ranks as a consequence. And obviously, if he wins on Saturday, he'll tie GSP for all-time championship title fight wins with 13, right? So if you look at that, you would say, what does he want? I think what he wants is to slowly climbed the rungs of the ladder of greatness, which is not necessarily a vertical line. It can be a little bit disjointed. So here's what I mean. He wants the win on Saturday, yes, but he wants the value of the win, which is numerically tying GSP for most title fight wins in UFC championship history, in a series of other, I think if he got another win, it would put him most all time at light heavyweight, right? So he'd be the winningest fighter in light heavyweight history, and all different kinds of things like that. So that would put him in that kind of a company where you could begin to say, wow, man, like, we've been talking about John, GSP, maybe Demetrius Johnson, and Anderson Silva, and sort of these top four. I think what he's looking to do is pull away from that pack. And Saturday puts him, I think, one step closer to pulling away from that pack. The thing that ultimately he doesn't have that St. Pierre has is the title in the other weight class. Now, he might be good enough to be ranked ahead of St. Pierre all time, A, already, B, maybe after Saturday. But it's at least debatable because of what St. Pierre did. So what does he want? I think he wants to get, again, it's not the qualitative value of the win on Saturday necessarily. If what we think is going to happen happens, it's the numerical value add that Santos brings. But past that, then it becomes qualitative. Then I think you're going to really see him say qualitative, potentially financially, if that was there. But I think what he really wants to do is, what do I really need to do to pull away from the pack? And there's a lot of different ways you can do that, but I think that's probably what he's thinking.
Absolutely fascinating. Just quickly, finally on this fight, final question. Obviously, Santos has a tough test in front of him, but if he is to accomplish a win over Jon Jones, is there a particularly smart way in which he can do that? Do you see a specific way that Santos could possibly shock the world, considering Jones' strengths and weaknesses? Is there any sort of path in your mind, Luke?
I thought Dan Hardy had pretty good analysis about this, to be honest, which is if you're looking for someone in the UFC light heavyweight division right now who's going to out-technical, outsmart, and again, everyone can have a bad day, but you're saying if both are performing at their highest level, who's going to be that guy when you point down the list to outsmart him? And they don't exist. That's not the person there. But no one's invincible, right? Like, no one just wins by virtue of their existence. They have to go out there and they have to earn it every time. Santos is wild, yes, which creates vulnerabilities, of course, but he's powerful too, and he hits hard, and he is relentless with that kind of style. So there's some reasons to think that perhaps if Jon is a little bit off or zigs when he's supposed to zag, I mean, there's not a huge margin of error you're allowed to have. Then yeah, Santos can probably do that. Santos is not going to beat him trying to do something he doesn't ordinarily do. Santos, if he has any chance at all, it is by doing that. And I think, recklessness sounds stupid because against the very best, I don't know what it does for you. But recklessness is also, it's difficult, and it's unpredictable, and it's powerful, and it's unforgiving. So Jon has to be what he is, which is the much smarter fighter, and he should probably win. But if Thiago's going to win, it's dancing with exactly the partner that got him to this level.
100%. Just looking at the other title fight on the card, Luke, obviously you got Holm versus Amanda Nunes. And, Holly's had twice as many losses as wins since she beat Ronda Rousey. It's been, I guess, a somewhat tough few years for her. And on the other hand, Amanda Nunes, she's beaten the who's who, including Ronda, Misha, Valentina twice, and now Cyborg to become the double champ and, the woman who many people consider the female GOAT. If Holly is able to beat her this weekend, what do you think it says about Holly?
She would be like the Eli Manning. Do you guys follow American football at all?
Not really. Well, you might have to break that one down for us.
Okay, how about this? You know who Tom Brady is, probably, right?
Sure, yeah.
Sells beers, right?
Something like that. Tom Brady, of course, is now the quarterback for the New England Patriots. He is widely regarded, at least at this point, certainly after the last Super Bowl win, as the greatest person to play that position. You have to understand how difficult that position is to play. There are 32 teams in the NFL. Boys, every year they can't find 32 good quarterbacks. It is an insanely difficult position to play. There are maybe 10 or 15. There's probably 10 good quarterbacks, 15 decent ones. And after that, it's like, they're not that good. And he's not just number one. He's number one by a wide margin at this point, not merely because of his accolades, but because deep into his 40s, he's still able to do really impressive things that require both physical skill and an understanding of the game. Now, the New England Patriots, off the back of his work, as well as many others, have been probably the most important dynasty in the NFL in the last 20 years. That's a very common and very non-controversial statement. Yet, when when they had to play the New England Giants, excuse me, what am I saying? The New York Giants, and they had to do it on the biggest stage, including at a Super Bowl. Eli Manning is not the quarterback that that Tom Brady is, not even by a mile. But he got a Super Bowl. Well, he's got 2 rings, but he got a Super Bowl ring on that day just because he showed up that day like it was nobody's business. He fought to his, he competed to his upper bound limit. And so to me, it's like, what would it say? Well, the resume is what the resume is. At this point, Amanda Nunes' resume is way better than Holly Holm's. But maybe on that day, she can just be the spoiler like he was on 2 different occasions where he was not considered to be somebody he was considered to be a good quarterback. Don't misunderstand me. He wasn't like some scrub who out of nowhere showed up. But Holly's not considered a scrub who out of nowhere showed up. She might be considered a little bit older, not the same level. I guess the point I'm trying to say is someone as good as Holly Holm in the right matchup and on the right day, we have seen it across sports, across genders, across any number of different barriers you want to erect. They can still be extremely competitive when the moment is right. The interesting thing about, to me, with Amanda is it's like, how would Holly Holm win? I could see a couple scenarios. I could see one where she makes Amanda Nunes work and she gets tired and then just gets picked apart. I could see one where she avoids the takedown. I could see one where she sticks and moves and avoids the long reach and the big power punches. How likely these are, different question. But some of the ways she was able to beat Ronda, I don't think necessarily she can port over, but something where she can force. It's like, how do you beat Francis? You're going to slug it out with Francis? No. But if he gets tired, can you beat him then? Maybe. Amanda's gas tank has not been the liability recently that it has been historically, but if Amanda can find clever ways to engage her, maybe she can be Eli Manning.
As Al Pacino would say, any given Sunday. Am I right, Luke? Going back to the NFL references.
Dude, it sounds funny, but it's real, man. This is what, I mean, just as a side note, this is one of the reasons why watching the NFL is like fucking crazy, because there is dumb parity. And that's why the Patriots are so special. It's because in a league where there might be more parity, and I watch, dude, I don't watch Australian sports, obviously, but I watch European sports. I watch tennis. I can't think of any league ever on the planet that has parity like the NFL. And it's not perfect, but for them to have that kind of ability, and then for Eli to come in and be like, sorry, I'm a slack-jawed yokel with a stupid mouth-breathing face. Here are my 2 Super Bowl rings. What does that tell you?
It reminds me of when Michael Jordan beat the Monsters in Space Jam, Luke. A very good sports reference for the Australians that we could probably pick up over the NFL.
You're really adding to this conversation.
Well, listen, I just want to point out for all the Aussies that don't watch NFL that Tom isn't actually from the Brady Bunch TV show. So just clear that up for everybody. All right, now let's quickly talk about Ben Askren versus Jorge Masvidal. I mean, this is really the fight for me that makes this card the X factor that it is. I think a lot of people want to see exactly what's going to go down here. Askren was in some trouble against Robbie Lawler, but ultimately won. And it wasn't that long ago that Masvidal got out-grappled by Damian Maia, even though he had his moments. Look, so how do you see this one going down? And seeing as his last fight was so short and controversial, what are you hoping to have answered when it comes to Ben Askren this weekend?
Ooh, so here's the question for Ben, the issue that Ben Askren's up against. Not like for me or something, but I'm just thinking in general, which is I think I know how good Ben Askren is, which is pretty goddamn good. But as much as he has curried favor with the fan base on this sort of 180 situation, which, by the way, good for him, long overdue, the question still remains about Ben Askren. Exactly how good is he? Like, you kind of know how good Jorge is. You have at least you have some sense of it. You know how good Robbie Lawler is. You have a pretty good sense of Tyron Woodley or many of the competitors in that division. You don't really know for sure with Ben, or certainly to a much lesser extent. Jorge Masvidal will tell you a lot. He will tell you exactly how good you are. And for Ben, Jorge Masvidal is hard to put away. He's been beaten before across 2 weight classes, but he's very hard to hurt and keep him hurt. He's very hard to submit. He's very hard to like knock down and then just, absolutely bludgeon him for a round. So I think Ben is going to show us how good he is. And my hunch is probably good enough to beat Jorge. But the reality of the Lawler fight was perfect because in the end, I know it's controversial, but Ben turning it around the way he did and coming back and then securing that bulldog choke, however controversial the finish might have been, you know, he took a beating in that first round in a way that like even Douglas Lima didn't put on him. Carl Amasu maybe over time, but certainly not in a short space like that. It's like, okay, Ben is as good as we thought he was, but he's also fighting much better competition with less margin for error. I think you're going to get something similar. You're going to get something similar with Jorge Masvidal. But what he's up against, and I think why you're so intrigued, is because, yes, he's got a big mouth and an interesting personality, but we're trying to find out exactly, like, is he championship material? We're going to get a much better answer on Saturday.
It's also fascinating because the UFC is seemingly getting behind him. You got Colby Covington now not fighting Usman. He's fighting Robbie Lawler on ESPN. And, you know, the metrics and the numbers for Ben Askren are pretty impressive. So if he can work his way to a title shot, you got to think he might be a pretty good draw for the UFC, at least somewhere down the line. Appreciate the time, Luke. Just quickly, one more thing if we can squeeze it in. Just want to ask you about Luke Rockhold, and then we'll get out of your hair. Obviously, he's making his long-awaited debut at light heavyweight at UFC 239 against young Blachowicz. I'm wondering what you're sort of expecting in terms of differences in Luke Rockhold when he comes up to this weight class, and also sort of what you think of the myth or the theory that Rockhold has, I guess, not the greatest chin, because, you know, I guess with Michael Bisping, he's not a guy that's really known for his power, and he knocked him out. But then again, you know, Vitor Belfort doing the spinning bottle cap challenge to your face, and Yoel Romero, the way that he hit Rockhold, I feel like those kind of shots would put anybody down. So do you think that it is a case of Rockhold maybe boiling himself down too much, down to 185, and his body not really being able to handle it? Or do you think, you know, maybe it was somebody else, something else, more tactical errors when he had those key losses?
Yeah, every time you see someone take a bad loss and you see a lot of this in MMA all the time. Oh, they got a bad chin. I've seen people who don't have great chins. It's not exactly what you're looking at here. Now, again, I'm not saying he was taking the sturdiest or he's showing the sturdiest ability to resist damage at 185 I've ever seen. But, you know, people saw Sage get dropped. Oh, Sage has a bad chin. Yeah, it turns out that his face got shattered in 8 or 9 places, right? And I was like, what are y'all talking? Like, what are you talking about? And same thing with Aaron Pico. You're saying, oh, he's got a bad chin. It's like, well, at this point, he's done some damage to it, sure. But it's like, do y'all see the shots he's taken? These are not small at all. They're huge shots. So I'm not saying he has the best one, but I'm not saying he's got the worst one either. For me, man, I've interviewed Rockhold a couple of times. I know you guys have as well since he decided to move up. He's talking about lifting weights and feeling better and like eating not whatever he wants, but certainly less restrictively and just feeling like $1 million. Man, there was a time when we were talking about Luke Rockhold that could go down if he keeps going as maybe not breaking Anderson Silva's streak, but like the next generation of middleweight after him. And we lost that a little bit. I don't know, man. I'm not ready to throw in the towel on Luke Rockhold at all. I kind of want to see what he's got at 205. Anthony Lionheart-Smith has shown like there's just a huge ability you can dump into getting better at the things that make a good fighter what they are. If you don't have to sort of, you know, cut yourself down to 1 million pieces. Thiago Santos is in the main event. Look at this. This is ridiculous, right? So, yeah, I've got. I don't know how everyone else feels. I know Luke pisses off a lot of people in the sport. I've seen some of the reactions every time he says something, and you know, his Anthony Smith criticisms aren't very fair, but I still think very highly of him, and I believe absolutely that the weight cut has contributed to his ability to not be able to take a shot. And I'm expecting. I don't know this will happen, but I'm expecting him to look pretty good. Yeah.
I mean, if he gets past Yana, it's going to be interesting to see how he looks. Do you see him as a possible next title challenger for Jon Jones? Is that a fight where if Luke looks good at 205, that kind of excites you a little bit to see what goes down between those two guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got a lot of work to do it. He's going to have to win impressively and then get on the mic and do his thing. And
have a smooth post-fight interview, which could be tough.
Yeah, because the other part is like, DC's fighting Stipe at 241, and so that just creates a lot of complication about what would be next, assuming DC wins. And if he doesn't, then maybe that would open up the door. So like, it doesn't even matter necessarily what he does or doesn't do with that hanging over there. But yeah, I think if he goes in there and looks like whoa, holy shit, like Luke Rockhold is back. Yeah, I think people might do it, but it's just if DC wasn't there, I would be much more committal about it. But because DC's future is so uncertain, I'm a little bit hesitant to say, okay, you beat Blachowicz. I don't know how you can deny him. I could see a lot of scenarios where they deny him, even if he looks awesome.
Appreciate the time, Luke. Thank you so much for jumping on the program. Obviously, guys, follow the man on Twitter at LThomasNews. Of course, the Luke Thomas Show. Don't listen to Chael Sonnen. The Luke Thomas Show isn't going anywhere. It's on SiriusXM. It's Monday to Friday. You can get the greatest analysis and discussion on there, and even sometimes interviews. And of course, Luke's YouTube channel. If you don't have Sirius, you can catch a lot of his great stuff on there as well. The YouTube channel is booming, and I really appreciate your time, Luke. Thank you so much for jumping on Submission Radio.
Anytime, boys. I appreciate it.
And there you guys go, Luke Thomas. So happy to have him on the program, Cass. Very kind to give us his time. He's got the baby. He's got the show. He's also got this new project that's going to come out. Of course, look out for that Monday next week, like you mentioned. I'm really excited to see what this announcement is going to be. Now, as we wrap up, just quickly, I saw yesterday at the movie theater. I downloaded it illegally. No, I did. I watched it at the movie theater. I was really, dude, okay, here's the thing, just real quick. I always thought about what would happen if I went forward in time and then something that was created that was really popular wasn't around, and I was sort of the innovator of it. Hot Tub Time Machine sort of did that. When that guy, I forget what his name, the bald one, he sort of went back in time and bought some stocks and something like that, and then when they went back forward in time, he was rich and stuff. So I always thought about that. I always thought about what would happen if artists didn't create this music, and then I was like, oh, hey, I know a song, blah, blah, blah. Check this out. Like Eminem Stan, Dennis Stan, or like Dennis Real Slim Shady, or like something I would never be able to pull off. But I always thought about that. So this is why this movie appealed to me. Also, the Beatles catalog is a good one. So watch this movie. First hour was okay, and the second hour was absolute rubbish. I thought the main guy was just really shit. I don't know. He was disappointing to me. I know some people are really sensitive about the topic of this movie. I see people online really being unhappy when people said the movie was a bit of a disappointment. But to me, it was a letdown. I just thought the premises was really, really good. How did a premises like this turn into like a really, really, really terrible sort of romantic, I guess, comedy / I don't know, something else? I don't know.
When you say people are sensitive, what's the topic of the movie?
A lot of, because okay, so it's the Beatles. So a lot of people are really attached to this movie, and they're really happy to see it come out. And I'm not the first one to say that this movie is really disappointing. And a lot of people are like, well, why is it disappointing? Like they still did this, they still did that. And my reason for pointing out is you have this amazing premises that hasn't been attempted before. You got this great storyline. And by the way, on the way home, I was writing out the finish of it with the person that I watched it. I was writing out different endings that I thought could have been way, way better, like easy. And I'm not a writer or anything like that. So I feel like they took so many shortcuts. I feel like it was like a budget version of what it could have been. The end was really disappointing. If you're a fan of the Beatles catalog, definitely check it out because the movie has a lot of the songs through it. But man, things did not make sense, Cass. And I mean, I know I'm talking about a movie where like the Beatles are no longer a thing. But come on, guys. I mean, what are we really doing here? As Jimmy Crute would say, we're not here to fuck spiders. So let's get some shit together. Honestly, like, if the songs weren't... If it wasn't the Beatles and it was, like, something really, really crap, like if it was, like, T-Pain or something, someone forgot all the T-Pain songs and was bringing them back, like, I would give it, like, half Timothy Johnson mustache out of 5. Because it's the Beatles, and I feel like it's a reintroduction of the Beatles to a lot of people, including myself, who forgot how many great songs they had. And anyone could sing their songs, and they still sort of come out sounding good. It gets like 1.5 Timothy Johnson's mustaches out of me. But I'm just being, honestly, like, I'm being really, really giving here. I feel like they ruined the premises. That could have been so good. And now it's going to be tough for someone to do something similar because it's ruined.
Just quickly, what is the movie about? Because I'm a bit confused. I've never heard of it. So is it about the Beatles, or is this some kind of crazy like time travel thing where
it's like a crazy time travel thing. There's this guy living in a small town in England. He gets hit by, he's like terrible. He writes these songs. They're terrible, not terrible, but they're not the greatest. No one really cares about him. He's just like a small town guy. He works in like a Costco version over there, and then he gets hit. He like quits. Gets hit by, there's like a big blackout, and he gets hit by a bus. He's riding his bicycle. When he wakes up, no one knows what the Beatles are.
Oh.
And no one knows what the Beatles are. He's like,
so he just brings him back.
Yeah, someone gives him a guitar, and they're like, he's like, a great guitar deserves a great song. And this isn't a spoiler because it's in a lot of the trailers. And then he sings a Beatles song with his mate. So like, oh, what is that? Like, he's like, oh, the Beatles. I'm like, what are the Beatles? And then like, and he's like, oh, don't you know they're like the greatest ever? They're like, oh, mate, calm down. It's not Coldplay, but it's great. Something like that. Like, wait a minute. And this is a guy that's failed. that's basically then stolen the Beatles catalog and performs it. And then the stupidity just happens, man. Stupidity. And again, I don't like to hang shit on anybody, but this guy just didn't have the emotional ability to play out the character the way it needed to be played out, and they missed all the fun bits of what would happen if you did it. Do you know what I mean? So the start was cool, and then they just skipped all the fun bits, and it went straight, for me, into a really, really badly written sort of romantic movie that it was just really disappointing. So anyway, 1.5 Timothy Johnson mustaches. Cass, as we wrap up, I want to thank our guest, Luke Thomas. I want to thank Tommy Toehold. I want to thank our man, Brett Okamoto. UFC 239 around the corner. Any final sort of parting words for the people as they get ready to watch this big event this weekend, Cass?
Stay safe. I think by the time this show comes out, it's going to be 4th of July. So stay safe, party hard, and we'll catch you suckers next week.
That's right. And if you get hit by a bus and Submission Radio is no longer around, we recommend you don't try and replicate this because, I mean, once was enough. We'll see you guys next week.